1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Hopefully the buffering has kind of finished its buffering. And it's lovely to see, tech upgrading, widgets upgrading, new placements, obviously, and just focusing on the celebration side of it. Because if we don't focus on that celebration side, archons or no archons, planets or no planets, we don't want to fall on like some type of negative esoteric fog plasma energy. Because obviously, from different constellations above the solar system constellations, the fog eventually turns into some plasma, some hydro transition, some hydro migration of elements and God's energy and consciousness, right? So there's a hydro transition of, pre-plasma to different formings of plasma to different consciousness intelligence, inducing and involving and influencing the very fabric of the matter of plasma. And then the plasma is somehow simultaneously in this 3D matrix that shares core infrastructures of like steel elements, already it being a thing, right? So it's good to celebrate rather than focus on the Debbie Downer stuff. And I'm doing this for my own healing, right? Because if I don't reflect, I won't heal. So it's like, what's the point of this shit if we're not gonna do that, right? And obviously how there's different angles and perspectives of red tape that go about that. That's the different new technical challenge, right? That's the new challenge of even beyond just like, even beyond just kind of minimizing it and constricting it and limiting it to just AI. Rather than limiting it to AI, there's like there's different things going on, right? So like how nature could have a different type of oneness, and then somehow the mirror of nature, the mechanical matrix, however that came to be, that has different perspectives. Call it 108 in a classic standard Vedic Indian, ancient Hindu Indian knowledge educational system, right? They have spaced out the original Vedic astrology, galaxies, space constellations, whatever, and the different contexts of the constellations, how there's a unique using of 108 and other things within 108 that could occur within just a different type of 108. So 108 divided by 2 is 54. 54 divided by 2 is 27. 27 divided by 2 is 13.5. And 13.5 divided by 2 is 6.75, if I'm not mistaken. And within just using those numbers, the constellations have like some type of exchange factor, right? Respectively. So what do I mean when I say the constellations have an exchange factor? Aside from, I guess because like the solar system, we're coming from below it, right? So since we're coming from the below solar system, there's a whole different ballpark of energy consciousness, and I guess the predecessors metaphysical astrology and respectively astrophysics respectively, and I use that term kind of like casually and calmly, right? And not more or less loosely. But there's an exchange within the constellations, and the constellations, we're coming from the bottom of that, and from that there's two different advanced factors that are happening. The planets that are in the spaces that they're in right now in the physical world, they're kind of giving us different pathways, new awareness of different pathways, right? There's just a different exchange happening within the constellations, right? So I'm talking about two different contexts of constellations. I'm talking about whatever the surface level physical world is and those physical constellations. And then I'm talking about a different context of constellations where, you know, there's a transition of hydroplasma before the Earth, right? Instagram 2021 stuff. Seriously. So, like respective 2021 stuff, right? So within the respective 2021 stuff, there's like there's something before the Earth, and the thing that's before the Earth, that's quote unquote God's consciousness, and God has his own star alignment and math, Vedic astrology, respectively, and how he uses different numbers to space out evenly. However, the constellations have some type of perfect math order, right? Because the math is quote unquote perfect because it's aligned and harmonic within itself, right? So there's three different contexts of the constellations, right? There's a real Dreamtime one. There's, you know, the Vedic calendar one, and then there's whatever, you know, I guess the basic institutional education is calling it, using it as a system of different type of real-time apparent physical measurements. And within those physical measurements, there's different physical measurements that could be had, such as, you know, the different objects that are in the physical constellation space. They're having a real-time effect with them influencing their power and what they do within just the field of the surface level physical matrix. And they're having an exchange, like Saturn being in Aries. That means like he's interacting with different stars, with neighboring planets, and those stars, they could act on perhaps their own sovereign accord in just, you know, the predecessor spirituality, or whatever you could, like, you know, I guess however wherever you could go, right, within your journey of self and dreams and consciousness, respectively. So there's three different contexts of the constellations, right? So like within focusing on one of the three is aside from focusing on the surface level physical, aside of focusing on God's, conscious perspective of it, and his, like, you know, field of it, or whatever. And I don't even like using the word God, or the third context being just seeing, like, what are the numbers telling us, like how the Vedic astrology, there's similarities to tropical astrology and Vedic astrology, most respectively. So the thing I'm trying, I guess, like, I had a different point when I was thinking of the number 108, but within thinking of 108, I'm just going to take a quick pause and try to remember why I came on the live. I guess the tidbit I wanted to say of coming on the live is, Saturn and the other planets in this conjunction were simultaneously being alleviated and non-alleviated, because we're pressured to work, we're pressured to do a job in this field of the physical solar system. So the physical solar system, that Aries constellation, or whatever other Egyptian title you have it, that's leaving its own imprint, right? So within its own imprint, as we're going down the seasonal line in the physical solar system, that constellation, like 6 months from now, the Aries constellation will still be buzzing with different energies of exchange, from the objects to space to whatever minor consciousness that there is in. And one context of the constellation is tropical astrology, right? So that's the third context of the constellation thing, is the tropical astrology. The other two, I guess, are like God and his Vedic calendars, right, or whatever. And there's more points to be delegated within the Vedic calendars, and how you could just be casually and hopefully, like, in a new intelligent balance, having a new understanding neatly of what, how there is a connection between, like, Vedic astrology and tropical astrology and the astrophysics, most respectively. And we've been working with that system, with and without the esoteric archons, since the 1960s, right? So we're like, that system has been in play, that standard overall surface level matrix system. It's been a thing before we were born, right? And it's going to be here after we die, and that's a whole different conversation, death and rebirth. So the last, I called the last video live Baby's Breath, because Aries season is a rebirthing. It's a reborn. The babies are being reborn. The new seeds are at the stage 1, right? So all of our consciousness is really more fertile, and we're more programmable than we think. And the predecessors said to approach that with a different type of balance of actions and energies, right? those actions and energies being aligned with supposedly quote unquote God's woo-woo mind, then the correct effort could be thus in store, in play, and in effect, right? So I guess just starting over from this conversation, starting this conversation over, I just wanted to like kind of like share one context of the constellations where there's an exchange effect happening, and we're in this present moment. However, the clock is set, we're living through those exchanges of energy, right? Saturn conjunction Aries, trading off energies in a different physical metaphysical phenomena. There's energies being traded off, right? And then it goes deep, and that's like the cap to the depth. It's like the cap to the well. It's like the cap to the underground dumbs. It's the cap to the underground inner earth. And I've had dreams of being inside of like deep within earth. Like obviously the minds and whatever approach you go towards the minds, that's a real esoteric. That's like post university, right? Now we got all the research and information and we understand what to do with it. And now we know where we go because the maps are at the next level. Hello, 2026. Now that the maps are at the next level, now we know where to go because we have the maps. Shout out to 2016 predecessors, right? Generally, right? Because there's different waves of influence and intelligence and knowledge that keep having the progressive evolutional point that where we're at. We're there because of the accumulated levels of evolution through not just humans, like different benevolent ETs, right? And there has to be benevolent ETs because there's a benevolent, positive thing in nature, in consciousness, and in the force of life, right? And then just starting over this conversation, there's one more point that wants to be squeezed out, and I had it because who knows how, like, I guess the cerebral pathways of just the brain chakra, it kind of like it aligns all the other things for its consciousness to focus on the physical hardware of the human being. Oh yeah, so the esoteric fog, we could choose to celebrate rather than some esoteric imbalanced archons pity party, right? Micro archons, different other chief archons, whatever pity party that's happening. The esoteric warfare battle is for us to choose peace and happiness, right? Quote unquote. Aside from all the like respective Buddhist stuff that's been there, right? And we're like millennia on millennia on millennia, right? 30,000 years ago, like beyond Gondawa, beyond the Aboriginals in Australia, right? So a whole different pre-prototype, pre-Aboriginal, pre-Gondwana or whatever, or Gandawa, Naga, or Bagawada, or whatever. Obviously there's many different dialects within the ancient tongues of the original first race, which was the Zoroastrians, right? Shout out to the original predecessors. And the Zoroastrians, they obviously energetically were around the Gnostic times and the Gnostic ages, pre-Gospel of Thomas, right? And those Zoroastrians, they obviously had within their own, whatever context of pagan you want to use that, those Zoroastrians had their own perspective and usage from their relationship to the balanced archons of astrophysics, right? So they, on a different time, they were using astrophysics differently, and maybe we could be connected casually without the titles, understanding the titles differently. Maybe we're connected to some of these balanced archons that did the shit, made the shit itself. And after making that shit, now we're just new human species bystanders using some shit we don't even know what we're on, right? Respectively to the growing human intelligence. So within all of that being said, we don't have, like, we could focus to celebrate, aside from just the inversions, and I'll do a different journal entry on what I mean by that, but I don't want to like talk about that right now. We could choose to celebrate, so we could go beyond just the esoteric warfare of being in a muck. And if you're in some type of muck, esoteric emotional maturity, esoteric emotionality, if we're in a muck, it's because certain different warring archons were in their campaign story narrative agenda, and we have to work energetically, good karmically, to get out of those agendas and focus on maybe the balanced archons that put the shit together, right, respectively. And I'm just saying it on a whole different note, right? So with and there's obviously other points to be squeezed out too, right? And I'm just sharing this randomly. Wow. See, look it. Just pause, pause. And I'm actually going to open this. So I'm actually going to try this right now. It says Ocean Bomb Yu-Gi-Oh drink. So I'm going to drink a Ocean Bomb Yu-Gi-Oh drink. And let's see what this guy, I think his name's Merrick. So let's see what Merrick or Malik. So let's see what Malik has to say. And one love to everybody. Oh my gosh. Okay, Malik is saying, ooh, I'm not even going to say what he's saying. But he's from the area, TV Tokyo, Konami. And somehow Yu-Gi-Oh! And Metal Gear Solid are connected because they're from Konami, right? So I'm going to conclude this live. I'll do a part 3. I'll read the page of notes of how, and the notes are like, you wouldn't even believe the notes I took, right? Because in the past lives, the details, without the certain details, you don't know what's going on, right? So that's the thing. A lot of us are like in bewilderment, and I respect everybody's journey, right? Or maybe not, until like the disrespect boundary has been crossed and threshold, and that's just its own, game of life, right? Because obviously we all could be in our shadow, and we all could be, and that shadow is not necessarily always good. It's how you're feeding and how you're taking care of the shadow. That's the good part. If you're not taking care of that shadow side, that unconscious beast mentality mind, and it's running amok and it's going on its own trail, then that's some type of quote unquote original open source. Energetically speaking, that's a shadow dog, right? And obviously, that's the thing. What do I mean by original open source? The language was used before we were born by other beings who made it. If they made it, they own it. So there's a simple detection of how there could be hypocrisies within the copyright system, casually saying that, right? Without having the distorted mind and its distorted programs, however they got there, run amok, right? Because this 2026 stuff, we have to actually be really mature, right? Because if Saturn's giving us all this pressure and he's the one that kind of pretty much traps you in and locks you in pretty much at the surface level, then we have to be serious actually at all costs, because but there's other pathways other than just that literal esoteric, jailer, right? Shout out to the predecessors. So there's a jailer effect in different degrees and layers without us even realizing there's a jailer effect respectively. And I'm not even trying to scare anybody. I'm just saying if you haven't been to jail, obviously I've spent a couple nights in jail, but I'm not trying to even say anything about that. I'm not even trying to say that's even that should be a thought or two, right? I'm just saying that experience, if you go through that experience, it could change you too, right? You could be like, okay, now I appreciate my freedom, right? So I appreciate my freedom and liberty, but I still got to keep working to keep that liberty and freedom, right? And earlier I was talking about pretty much the evolution of maps, right, respectively. So I'm going to conclude the conversation here. Or I could keep going for 2 more minutes, but I'll do a part 3 to this if I read the notes, and that will be a whole different entire episode on its own. Thank you very much.